Creepy things happen before the grave.
A Monster Hunter's Diary, Entry 1, by BlazingPheonix07. I am a part of a secret group of monster hunters. I was reading through our archives and found this diary. Maybe you guys will find it as interesting as I do. I stepped into the shadow of the massive wooden doors. The inside of the crypt was far eerier than the dusk and falling snow outside. My eyes slowly began to adjust to the darkness. A long stairway led down into the ground. Black, flaking blood covered the carcasses of armor lying on the stairs. Hundreds of skeletons hidden away. The iron shaped to protect them now prisons for their souls. I took a few steps in. Broken tiles crunched under my feet, and massive columns created shadows even in this darkness. I stood for a few minutes, waiting, challenging, for something to come charging from the void. Nothing came. It looks like it won't be easy to find. Who am I kidding? They're never easy to find. I began my descent, the echoes of long-forgotten battles still raging within the walls. That's the sad part about my people's existence. We are forced to hear beings long gone, to see them even when they do not want to be seen, to smell and feel them even when they have no scent or body. We are the Lovak, hunters, or filthy hounds. Depends on the country. Of course, everyone needs us, but in some places the church has convinced the people that we create monsters just so that we can get paid to kill them. For the most part, we are ordinary people, trained from birth to kill the things that lurk in the darkness and able to see spirits, but still ordinary, except for those like me. I am one of the few who were bred for this. Purple eyes, sharp, almost steel-like nails, more canines than the average person, better hearing, smell, taste, eyesight, and stronger than most men. These are just some of the things that tell us apart. My leg jolted, almost giving out. Something creaked and snapped. I heard a clang down the stairs. Many more followed as a helmet bounced down the steps. A ghastly, dark green smoke frothed from the collar of the armor that I had just kicked the helmet off of. A phantom rose from the shell of iron and stared at me, as if it had given up its dreams of being free and couldn't tell if this one was some new form of torment. It slowly began to drift closer. Its stench became more and more unbearable. Its bony hands were the first to solidify. Its mouth followed closely behind. Its teeth, pointy and gnarled from trying to chew and tear its way from the armor. Its rotted tongue poked through the holes in the cheeks where the skin had long fallen away. All that remained of its eyes were white orbs that now had holes of decay from rotting flesh and burrowing worms. Its eyes finally lit up. I braced my leg on the step below me, just as its claws smacked into the shoulder pauldrons beneath my cloak, giving my cloak a few nice cuts. It was new too, damn it! I barely managed to keep my balance. This damn demon is one of the strongest I've ever encountered. Usually they are too decomposed to do anything physical. I shook my arm, and a heavy iron chain unwrapped itself from around my wrist. It clinked onto the stone step. The demon's nose flared open as it smelled fresh iron, and it desolidified, vanishing up the tunnel. Damn bastard, my poor cloak! I wish I could cover the smell of iron, maybe lemon or mint. Then the damn bastards wouldn't run away all the time. I looked down the stairs, only a few more feet until the actual crypt. Why'd the damn fools have to fight down here? No wonder it was lured here. So much blood, despair. I approached the stone door at the bottom of the stairs in a crouch, listening and observing. The door had signs cut into it, words with meanings long forgotten, though it's probably something like, "Do not be a fool and fight a war in the crypts." The door was cracked open just a hair's breadth. Hot, putrid air rolled out from within. It smelled as if someone had butchered a pig in its own sty and shoved it into a leather bag and left it in the sun. Nothing. Not a sound came from the other side other than a steady dripping noise and something bubbling. The children didn't make it. I shoved the door over a little and crept into the room. The ghoul was gone, most likely collecting the next victim. Peeking around, an empty sack sat in the corner of the room. A fat butcher knife hacked into a blood-soaked wooden log next to a simmering cauldron. Whatever is in it smells putrefying. I peeked in. Brown, red sauce bubbled, and the occasional bone bobbed to the surface before being sucked back down again. Some herbs stuck to the rusted sides of the pot: witch's nettles, hagroot, black blood, whore's breath, various other poisons and black magic additives. Whatever lurks down here is definitely some form of magical hag or another. The bag! The children had been kidnapped from their homes, and mostly homes where the child slept near the attic entrance. It's another babaroga, a filthy form of witch that feeds on children. There's been so many lately. The babaroga is typically created by witches who seek power through cannibalistic potions, blood and flesh of babies, virgins and the like, often their own children. I've heard stories of some that got pregnant just to eat the child. Of course, babies hold no strength or power for the most part, and all it does is twist the witch into wicked forms of women that crave the meat of children and kidnap them, typically from the shadows of attics, beds, tables, and anything else. Hideous creatures are all they are. If the people in this village weren't such... They could have just sealed the entrance during the day and let her starve. I kicked out the fire and sat in the corner with my cloak wrapped around me, hiding my shape. It took about 2 hours for the little hag to come strolling through the door. The bag slung across her hairy back dropped and fell next to the butcher log with a soggy thud. She killed the kid already. This hideous, vile, filthy creature. She already killed the child. I'm so fed up with this shit. Vukoldlak, werewolves, strigoi, they all kill because they don't know better. Hell, even Wendigo are created out of desperation and lose their minds and humanity due to demons. I stood silently and crept up behind her. The single horn atop her forehead, from which the babaroga earned their name, came up to the bottom of my ribs. "Witch!" I hissed. She shrieked, hopped over her log, and began to waddle towards the door, frantically screaming. My chain wrapped around her ankle and she fell to the ground. "Filthy, disgusting witch!" I said as I dropped onto her stomach and grabbed her horn. I let her stare into my eyes, which shone red in the light of the embers as I pulled a dagger from my boot. Her puffy eyes widened, the pimples and warts double as her face wrinkled in fear. "You will see how it feels to be prey," I whispered into her crooked, pointy, hairy ears. I sliced her biceps and began to wrap the chains around her hairy, stumpy legs. She cursed and screamed. She kicked out and sliced the tendons of her thigh. The leg hung limply but hardly bled, the artery visibly pumped without a scratch on it. "What is it you use in your potions?" I asked, thumping my chin with my finger. "Oh yes, fingers," I said as she began to shake violently. I grabbed her arm and drug her to the log. "You creatures that used to be human are my least favorite." I lifted the butcher knife and hacked off her fingers and tossed them into the cauldron. "You bring yourselves into this decrepit state," I said as I did the same thing to her other hand. She cursed the most vile things upon me. I pulled a tiny bag from my bandolier across my chest and sprinkled powder into one of the bowls that laid on the ground next to the cauldron. They were all covered in a thick layer of grime. I patted her bald, moldy head. "It is my job to show you your humanity, or at least to remind you why people don't butcher and eat children, because we can feel pain, fear, and sorrow." I ladled some of the soup into the bowl. A few fingers floated on the top. I put it next to her face, and she screamed and shook her head away from it. "You know what happens when you fight." I sliced the sides of her jaw, dropping her mouth open and revealing crooked, rotted teeth. I grabbed her horn and yanked her head back, pouring the putrid stew down her throat. I sawed off her horn as she screamed in pain. The poison I added, making her intestines feel like they were melting. I dropped the horn into my pocket and grabbed the bag with the child in it. The horn would be my proof of the witch's death, and I would return the child's body to its family. I couldn't bring myself to look in the bag. The steady dripping liquid told me the kid was beyond any saving I could do. I unwrapped my chain from around the witch. Half her tendons were cut, and she was in far too much pain to go anywhere. Her howls echoed up the stairs as I walked back up them. I feel sick, like my stomach is being grabbed and squeezed by the devil himself. I vomited onto the steps and settled down, huddling into my cloak. It should still be nightfall. A short break won't hurt. I poured a mix of herbs into my water skin and sipped. I will continue after a short break when the nausea subsides. I crept up the remainder of the stairs and poked my head out of the door. My footprints were already half filled with fresh snow. I looked at my hand as the crusted blood was wetted by the falling snowflakes as they melted. I looked up and saw a young girl with white hair and a big fur coat poking her head from behind the trees. "Are you okay, mister?" she asked. "What are you doing out here? It's dangerous." I stepped towards her. "That old lady grabbed me." Her eyes began to tear up. "I've been hiding in the forest for days." Her voice quaked out. "It's okay." I walked over and knelt down in front of her. "She won't ever come out of that cave again." She touched my bloody face with her hand. "So this is all hers?" I nodded. "Thank you," she said into my shoulder as she hugged me, crying. "Where's your family? Are they in the village?" I asked. She shook her head no. "I was traveling with my dad when she got me. I don't know where he is." "What's your name?" "JL." "Well, Jael, how about we get heading back to town?" I said, standing and lifting the bag off the ground. She looked at the bag but hardly seemed to care about it. I started walking towards town. "It's JL," she huffed, wiping away her tears and running to catch up with me. "You're supposed to tell me your name, you know," she continued. "I am Colme." "What happened to your eyes, Colme?" She marched to keep up with me. "I was born with purple eyes," I answered while scanning the tree line. I finally looked at her. She was small, about 8 to 13 years old. Her face was round and pale. She wore a long, fluffy fur-lined coat and long white blonde hair stuck out from her hood. Bright blue eyes stared back at me from under the brim. "How long has it been since you've eaten?" I asked. I think she just about started drooling. "How about we stop and eat? It'll be a few hours walking at this speed before we reach the village." She nodded her head so hard her feet about left the ground. We settled in the trees a few feet from the trail. I gathered some twigs and started a fire. I took a small cup and melted some snow. I also sprinkled in some herbs to give her a little bit of energy. I don't want to end up carrying her too. I pulled some jerky out of the bag on my back and a small wedge of cheese. She started gobbling down the food and tea. It's like she hasn't eaten in years. She swallowed it all without a word. She shined those blue eyes on me. "Do you have any more?" "No, that was all of it." I kicked out the small fire. "Let's go. I'm sure someone will have more for you back at the village." The village was just as run down as it was yesterday, the same holes and terrible shingling. At least the people seemed a little happier when they saw me approaching. Their faces changed the moment they saw that I carried a bloody bag. The guards swiftly grabbed the body bag and took it away before the family could see. They also tossed me a purse full of coins in exchange for the horn. I looked at JL. "Should we find your family?" "I want to stay with you. You seem safer than these villagers." She looked up at me, pleading in her eyes. "I can tell you staying with me is far from safe. I don't know if she understands what it is exactly that I deal with." "Then I want to learn how to fight monsters. I don't want this to happen to anyone else, please," she begged. She already did survive one encounter with a witch, and a few days in a forest alone, but what about her dad? Other than when I asked, she hadn't mentioned him once. Was he abusive? Maybe they just weren't close. Maybe... Okay, you begin tonight. I have some reading for you to do, then we will see how badly you want this. I stood and began walking to the market. "Really, mister? Can't believe it! I get to stay with Gomi!" she shouted, jumping with joy. She ran off the moment we got to the market, leaving me to gather the supplies alone. I got more dried meat and cheese, as well as a few herbs and a sleeping bag and a cup for her. I went to the horse stall and started bagging up the supplies. She ran up right behind me. "Call me! Do I get my own horse?" she asked. "No, you'll ride with me on mine, at least for now." "I get to ride with Comey!" she giggled. "Now let's go. I have another job north of here, and you have some reading to do tonight." I saddled up and pulled her onto the horse in front of me. The diary entry is in another language, and this is about as much as I can translate today. Let me know what you guys think of it, and I'll try to post more soon.